Hello and welcome to Here's the Pitch, sponsored by Masses Restaurants, 5 locations in St. Louis. You know all about them. I know all you people watching these podcasts here on YouTube have checked them out, so hopefully you do. If you're coming through St. Louis, massesstl.com is the website. And today I'm really excited. I mean, I love rock and roll. I love 80s rock and roll. One of my all-time favorites is joining me today. It's David Lee Roth. I can't believe it. Hello, Diamond Dave.
How are you? That's Diamond David Lee Roth there in St. Louis. How you doing?
Do you remember being at the arena in the 80s? Like tell me some great St. Louis stories, David.
I don't remember the arena too much, but I do remember the strip club. I think it was something called Little Bo Peeps, and I peeped on in, and I rolled on down to the local strip club because to me that was the arena. Ones and fives. Who doesn't like a nickel bag to the knees?
Give me a little running with the devil, Dave. Just a scream.
Wow!
All right.
Oh, you get this morning. It's early,
That's
we're on different time zones. I think that's what happened when Magellan went out, or you had the guy that went out with all the two animals. You know what I mean? And Noah's Ark. I think that was the problem. You hit different time zones. You keep one animal species at a time. You got me as David Lee Roth now.
that is of course Billy Mira, not David Lee Roth, and I thank Billy for joining me. And we were just talking. You do this David Lee Roth impression, and it's really awesome. But what's great about what you get to do with that is David makes no sense when he's talking. In any interview, he's not going to answer the question. So when you get to do the impression, you just thought you thought Magellan had an ark.
It's Magellan, right? Exactly, or was it Noah? They both were two guys on a mission. That's what, kind of like Van Halen, and that's what he would do. He would just go off into these ridiculous tangents, and somehow, though, they seem to make some kind of sense at the end. You were kind of like, I think I extrapolated something from that, and that's what we did with the characters.
Yeah.
Even the Ozzy was, because I never knew, when he was talking about it, because he could just basically, he don't what the hell he's saying half the time. But Ozzy's a lot smarter than you think he is, which is the funnier part of the whole thing. He just sounds like he doesn't make any sense, but he, in essence, does. He's got some wisdom there somewhere.
I felt like that show was almost, it was reality TV at the very beginning of reality TV, but it was clearly scripted, and they clearly gave him things to do, and he clearly knew that I'm just going to look like the old rock and roll star, the guy who bit heads off of bats, but I'll just mumble around the house, which he doesn't. Maybe he does.
Right, exactly. He just. They kind of, that's what most reality shows are. They're not really as much reality. But I think that what makes the Osbournes the show that everybody remembers is because it's the one that really, in my opinion, kind of sparked the whole craze off at the time. That really, for some reason, put that whole reality show craze into effect at that point.
And then came Jessica Simpson and Nick Lachey.
Ah, God bless America.
So, Billy, thank you again for joining me and doing your David Lee Roth off the top. And again, a lot of people have been joining these podcasts to see some former Stern guests and people that work there. And I think everyone, you can tell me, but I feel like a lot of people got to know you because of the David Lee Roth impression that you did on Stern. How did it come about? How did the David Lee Roth? And as I said to you too, I still don't think I hear anybody else doing David Lee Roth. I know now it's probably not as current as it would have been in 2002. It's still great, obviously, but you don't hear it. But tell me a little bit about how it came about that you're doing David Lee Roth.
So that's funny you should say that. So yeah, and I always say, a lot of people say, what moment of their career is something that it's all timing and being at the right place at the right time. So I did probably the two perfect impressions at exactly the right time. I'd always been doing Ozzy Osbourne impressions, and a lot of people forget that unless you're like, you remember back, oh yeah, I remember when you used to do Ozzy on the show. And then one day they just came to, it was like right around, I met Sal out. It was the first time I was on the show at all. I called into the show because Ozzy was there with, I think, Jack or somebody. And I started doing an impression over the phone, and I think John picked up, and he instantly put me through. And Howard started making fun of me, and he hung up on me. And this is like a 1 in a billion story. That night, who do I run into but Sal Governale, Sal the stockbroker. But way before he was on the show, we were both doing comedy at a venue on Long Island. And I said to a friend that was sitting next to him, I didn't even know he was there. I said, yeah. I called, he goes, well, you look so bummed. I said, I called to the Howard Stern show today. I thought I did the greatest Ozzy impression. And Howard hung up on me and told me how bad it was. He goes, everybody's been trying to figure out who the guy is that was doing that impression. I'm going to have you on the show in 5 days. I'm like, no way. In 5 days, that was what started everything, and I started doing call-ins. So that was like a chance meeting, and I happened to do the right impression at the right time, because at the time the Osbournes was really taking off, and Howard was very close to Ozzy, so it was perfect to interject it. And then that's how I got to know everybody that worked on the inner circle. And one day Gary walked up to me as I was leaving the studio, because I used to walk in, sometimes I would come in dressed as Ozzy, and I would just sit there. And I would just talk to the guys and ask them ridiculous questions, and and that was it. I would just basically make fun of everything going on. So I get out, and Gary goes, "Who else do you do? Do you do anybody else?" And I said, "Yeah, I actually I do David Lee Roth. I do a bunch of impressions." I said, but a lot of the, like you said, a lot of the impressions, I do the Jack Nicholson, and I do all the typical stuff, and the Robert De Niro, and all that other garbage, and the Al Pacinos, and. So I said, but I do David Lee Roth. They said, I've never heard anybody do a David Lee Roth. So he goes, well, why don't we book you as David Lee Roth? So the first time I did it in studio, it was with Cabby. And we didn't say that it was me, but then him and I got into like a thing on the air as David Lee Roth, and Howard loved it. And from that moment on, it was like I was the David Lee Roth guy. But then, as fate would have it, a year and a half, 2 years later, who takes over for Howard? So that whole year of 2005 was a build-up, as you know, to divide and conquer, and to just, totally dump into David Lee Roth. So it was just perfect. It was all perfect timing.
That is, it's crazy perfect timing. The one guy who takes over for him in New York is the guy that you do the impression of, that you've been doing on the it's crazy. You said you called in, so you were just a fan who called in, basically? And I always get...
comedian. I was a Long Island musician, comedian, and I was just starting in the... Because I used to go, I do all these impressions, and I remember I used to do them on stage, and I thought, people really like this. I was a singer, just a musician, and I said, let me try comedy, and I started getting into stand-up, and all of a sudden, everything started to move like really fast. It was just one of those crazy things. Yeah, so that was.
How does one get through? I remember maybe a couple times going, I'm going to try and call, and I know it was always busy, and I'm like, yeah, this guy's got 70 million people, or however many listening to him. I always got curious how many lines are there. That minutia. At some point, I'm gonna get someone in behind the scenes, because I know John is the guy who get you on the air, but just to get through without a busy signal. I
don't know. It was the strangest thing. When Ozzy was on, I picked up the phone. It was probably later in the morning, and I remember picking up the phone and calling, and Stern Show, and I think it was John. It sounded like him. And I said, it's Ozzy, and I went through this whole thing with him, and he paused, and he goes, hold on a minute. And all of a sudden, when you hear it, you can hear yourself get punched into the show, because now you're listening to it on the phone. You're like, right. And then all of a sudden, you're listening to everything that's happening live. And I remember going in, and I was like, oh, my God, I'm on. And he punched me. He goes, Ozzy's here. He says there's a fake Ozzy that's here in the studio with us right now, and that's how it all started. Yeah, it was like, think about it. What are the chances that they actually picked up, got through, they liked it. It was the first time I had ever called in. And next, in 4 minutes, I was on the show. I was like,
yeah.
The rest is history.
I was going to say, so then what, you went in studio, a week later? Is that how that worked?
No, actually, it was a year of Ozzy. And the first time I was in studio was September 11th, 2002. That was the first time. No, 2003. It was 2 years after 9/11. So on the anniversary of 9/11, I was on the show. Governor Pataki was on. The host of Survivor was there. And it was my first time being introduced. And that's when I came in all dressed up as Ozzy. I figured, let me go big or go home, So, and then they just let me sit. They didn't, as a guest, they just let me sit there. And they took me and they said, stay here the whole day. That was the whole start of everything.
How hard is it to kind of wedge your stuff in? Because, I'm sure as a comedian, you're like, this is a big break. don't want to fuck this up. I want to make sure.
Well, it is nerve-wracking. It's like us sitting here. Imagine all of a sudden now you got you could say something that actually affect the show that you've listened to all those years, and you got a microphone sitting right in front of you, and you got Artie Lange to your right, and you got Fred to your left. And that's really how the whole dynamic was. And I'm sitting there going, and then I'm looking at Robin. This is the old K-Rock days in the distance, and I'm looking at Howard's head, the back of his head, and I'm going, how the hell did I get here? How did this happen? But I said, I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm just going to have a good time with it. It took me a little while. That moment takes a little while, but once you get it going, it's a lot of fun.
How many times were you in studio? Do you kept count or?
A lot. I would go in studio, pretty often. I wouldn't say all the time, but I was in studio on a pretty regular basis.
How often did you get to go in as yourself, I should say?
A couple times. That I got to go in a couple times. That was...
one time you called you're in and you're like, told your what happened. You had a baby or something and you told them or something?
Yeah. That's right. You got a good... Yeah. That was... The day that my son was born, I always tell him, it was like a big media day. I said, I was talking about you on the Stern Show that day, and then I was on Broadway that night. And as I remembered, I was doing a show with Jim Brewer at Caroline's, and my phone went off, and then he was born like a couple hours later. So I was like, yeah, it was like one of those weird things. And then when I came back on again, I was like, my kid was born, and now I was like, yeah, and
what's the story?
Like the Stern baby.
So yeah, what was it like? Because you go in as a character. Because of this great voice, but then they accept you as Billy Mira. I mean, what were those moments going kind of as you continued on?
Yeah. I think, after 2005, because after I took over the show, that was the coolest thing because it made all the newspapers at the time. That was a big thing. This was before Twitter and Facebook. All we had were basically, I guess, the chat boards at those times, posting boards. Yeah. And like Stern Fan Network, so we would go in there and talk to them, or websites, and that was, there wasn't Twitter. You didn't know how many people were listening. It was crazy. But that day in the summer of 2005, when I took over and we did the mock takeover of David Lee Roth, it made every newspaper, every media source, everybody wanted to know who was that guy who did that. Like everybody said, who's the dude who actually did that? And that sparked off me being able to go on the road and be able to do all that stuff, and then go on as myself and bring in all this other things that I do, which was beautiful.
Were you on K-Rock for a few years there in the morning? It sounded like. Tell me about that. The Dave impression, like I said, is amazing. Do you get sick of having to do that all the time, or is it like, this is my stairway to heaven?
I love when people remind it. Yeah. I can remember the time. This brings me back to when I was in Vegas and I was on Fox out there, and I was in sports. This is going back between 2011 and 2013. And I remember I was crossing a street, and this was a crazy thing because on the West Coast, you'd think East Coast, I'm from here. But on the West Coast, people would always recognize it. I would say, you're the David Lee Roth. You haven't seen me on this other thing? No, I just remember the David Lee Roth thing he used to do all the time. I'm like, oh my God. I remember us crossing, and this guy is like rattling off all these bits, and I'm like, I said, how could you not like that?
Do you?
And they were like,
I mean,
the bit was like, what the hell is he talking about? I'm like, he's talking about a bit from a long time ago.
I've heard Dana Carvey do his John Lennon, Paul McCartney thing a million times, and it sounds like he's really worked it out. David Lee Roth, it feels like you could just start talking like him, and you don't have to have a script for him, right? Like you could just sort of, if I just say, hey Dave, tell me what's the weather like out there, and you could just kind of, the
weather? It's always sunny and gleamy. You know what I'm saying? It's always pearl teeth and the bright sunshine. And he'll just go into this whole ridiculous analogy. That's Dave. Yeah.
Do you have a script for him that you like when you're on stage, or do you just
unicorn?
do you have a script for like the Dave part of your show, or do you just start? I mean, is there anything that
No. I would sit there and Howard would, literally. So the great thing about Howard is he would give me great questions that he knew I could work with. Stuff that.
Unlike me, how's the weather, right? Yeah.
No, but I mean, he just knew, what to throw out that I could sit there and eat up and jumble it. It all depended if it was something relevant. But yeah, what's crazy is that a lot of the predictions that I made on the mock show that we did back in 2005, a lot of those predictions, oddly enough, came true. He did a lot of that stuff when he walked into the studio. He opened the windows, from what I understand. I think he just changed the whole atmosphere of the studio. He was doing it barefoot.
Palm trees. Yeah.
Palm trees. I said, I'm going to rip out the walls. I'm going to put down sand and put up some palm trees. So we've got the sun shining in here tonight, And it was like, he did all that crazy shit.
Isn't it odd that I mean, there's so many people that could have taken that job, and I guess if you're a radio head honcho, you have to think, all right, we're replacing the king of all media. I mean, so you do have to do. I guess I just couldn't imagine that would work, though. I mean, he can talk and he can do his thing, but it's the
problem with Dave is that he's, believe it or not, a lot more cerebral than people think he is, and he's an intelligent guy. He's not an unintelligent person. He's a little bit out there and a little bit eccentric, but his life has given him that benefit to be able to do that, has afforded him that. So the thing with Dave is I think he got a little too deep and didn't expand. He should have immediately put together a crew, somebody to bounce off of. He should have had a comedian in there with him, somebody to and I think he was doing it a little on the fly. I think he was learning. But think about Dave's position. He had nothing to lose. He was making $4 million a year, guaranteed money for whatever they lent the contract. So if you want to fire me in 4 months, he still gets paid. I think he wanted to be successful, but I think in the back of his mind, he knew what a task it was going to be. I was a little surprised that he didn't take a couple of steps before then. But who knows? Who knows what he was thinking? I think he.
You ever meet him?
He was going to get shot.
Yeah. Have you ever met him? Ever been able to do this for him, or to get to have a conversation with him at all?
No, but I do love the fact that he knows who I am and he's brought me up on a bunch of shows. So that's been satisfaction. But him and I have never. I heard a rumor that when he was at K-Rock, he was going to ask me to come in. I don't know how true that is, but I heard through the grapevine that he was actually going to. They were trying to tout some Howard Stern personalities and people. And one of the people that if he had lasted, that I heard through the grapevine, was going to be me, that he was going to ask to come in to somehow work with him. So that would have been great.
Dueling Daves.
Dueling Daves.
There's more than just one of me. I can't do an impression of him, but
there's more than just one of me. Now he does me better than I do me. The one and only Billy Mira. Billy, let me ask you a question. Well, what do you want, Dave? Well, I did a task last night of having my credit card and going to Scores. Now, did you wake up in a strange room this morning?
I always messed this up, but I remember when Dave and Sammy were touring together, and I think Dave was on Howard's show, and he said, well, how do you guys decide who's going to finish the show? He goes, Sammy's good at either warming up or cooling down.
Warming up or cooling down,
Like he had already thought this.
From me, it was like speedballs to milkshakes.
Oh, man.
2 big dogs, 1 dog ball, stuff like that. Like, where does he get all these stupid sayings? That's the brilliance of Dave, though. That's what makes it. That's what I would do. Prior to it, I would just maybe write down a few things and then pull them out that I could kind of say, well, there's some great Dave-isms. That's always the preparation that would go into something like that.
So I remember, when they brought him in to just be like the afternoon guy to test him out, I think it was. And he was talking up songs. And he was, doing these, like, for Ben Caught Stealing, he did this whole thing about a dog, and look at the dog back there in the background barking. I hope that's not my dog. And you could tell he had nothing prepared. It was hilarious. It was like, now, if Dave was doing a music show talking up songs, I think I could be into that too. But it was pretty.
Case him.
You mentioned being in the studio with Artie. I'm a huge fan of Artie. Do you know Artie real well? And how is he doing?
Yeah.
How is he?
Yeah.
Where is he?
That's me and Artie. I would consider him a friend. I wouldn't say we're like blood brothers, but I do consider Artie a very good friend. I hope he's doing good. I've heard that he's kind of fallen off the map as of late. So I hope that he's okay and everything's good. I'm praying, But, I hear from Artie when everything's okay and not, when everything's not okay. I kind of worry. But he may be just taking a break right now. Maybe that's something that he needs.
Maybe he's afraid of COVID. Maybe he doesn't want to get COVID. He likes everything else except for COVID.
Yeah, I don't like COVID. So anyway, let me just talk about COVID for a second. So but I hope he's doing really well. I consider him a very good friend. And then that's it. Yeah.
That impression you just did was
great to work with. I always had a great time.
I was gonna say that impression you just did of him was the 2020 Artie Lange, because I saw he had a podcast at the beginning of the year, and it was a lot of hand.
Yeah, a lot of hand. So, and then he would sit there and he talks, and he's got that growly voice. But now it seems like his mind is a little like, and I think that's for him, his mind is all over the place. He's a comedic, on funny comedic genius, and that's great. That's really important.
Do you ever
I love that? Yeah, well, that's something I can relate to, because I like to, in a conversation, I can interject a lot of funny stuff, so I can relate to him. So we relate a lot to each other. Except I do the impressions.
Did you ever tour with him? Did you ever do any of those big shows that he did? Because he was, man, that was the greatest thing for him. Like just getting I remember. Not radio, Carnegie Hall. It was like a big deal to him to be playing that place, and I saw him come through.
It'd be big place. It'd be big for anybody.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge accomplishment from a kid from Jersey.
What were those? What was it like just being around those tours? Because he was like the rock star of the show, so he was really the only guy going out and seeing the fans.
Yeah, it was very interesting to watch, because in those years there were a lot of hanger-oners, people. It was crazy. I'm sure it was crazy for him. It wasn't as crazy for me. I just witnessed a bunch of stuff. And I tried to, to not be that guy with him, all the time, and try to keep everything, as down to earth as possible. And, but I have a ton of stories that I wouldn't ever tell out in public. I have to talk to him about it if he ever wanted to on the air, but yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. Put it this way. I guess the question is, did anybody see that coming? Yes. Anybody who knew him well enough saw what was going to happen eventually. I didn't think it would go down the way it did on the show. And he's got so much, talent, Artie, that, he's got a great future if everything goes, the right way for him.
That was, it sucked because for me, it was sort of the end of the show for me. I loved the Jackie era. I was a kid when Jackie was on, and then I was in my 20s when Artie was on. And when he was no longer on, I was like, this just isn't going to work for me. I have to hear Artie in there just kind of jumping in and his one-liners were...
Have you listened to the show since his departure?
Yeah, I mean, and especially just, and everyone talks about the Marcy Turk era. I mean, it's just not the same, and I understand evolving and all that stuff, but it's just not the same. I mean, it's still good. Howard still does great interviews, obviously, and I can be entertained. I really wanted to hear how he was going to handle this whole COVID thing and working from home, and I do. I enjoy hearing him talk about Trump, because I know a lot of his listeners love Trump and love their guns, and he's like, well, you guys are nuts.
I think that's an amazing thing. I think anybody who knows the show long enough, just his anti-Trump rhetoric has been mind-boggling, but then on the other hand, who knows what, kind of relationship they had. I don't know. That's what you just sit there and go, weren't you guys really good friends at one time? I thought, but I guess people, like you said, they evolve and they change.
That's Baba Booey. Oh, we evolved. The show's evolved.
What's he going to say? What's Gary going to say? I love Gary.
The Sour Shoes impression of Baba Booey is my favorite impression that Sour Shoes does. I don't know if you...
He does. It's great. Oh, it's great. When I first heard about who Sour Shoes was, I couldn't understand who the hell is Sour Shoes? I'm like, and then I listened to Sour Shoes, and I'm like, I became a fan. I really loved what he did. He was just manic with the piano and coming out with all this stuff. I'm like, that was brilliant.
He's a savant. Yeah. I mean, I guess he's possibly, he clearly has some sort of issue mentally, but the fact that he can do these things, he's savantish. It's, it's great that, and I love, that's the thing that for Howard, there are times where I'm like, I don't know, Wendy the slow adult or Wendy do we need that? But there is that other side where that's her favorite part of her day, It's like, and Howard, maybe he's making fun of her to this millions of people, but for Wendy, she loves it. I don't know. So that's very philosophical. We don't need to get on that.
Think about it. It was a brilliant move by Howard. He took people, that otherwise might not have gotten a lot of attention, had a lot of attention, and all of a sudden they were getting a lot of attention. So for them, it was a great thing. Howard got fodder for his show. They were getting attention. Everybody's happy. One hand washes the other, and both hands wash the face,
That's very good. So again, the show is different now. You're not really on there as much, right? I mean, he doesn't really even have comedians call in or sit in or any of that.
No, it's the craziest thing. I would always still relish the opportunity to go in there and volley with them on a regular basis again. But like I said, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like the show has evolved into something completely different. Even when we used to go in there creatively, it was a different vibe back then. I don't know what it's like now. It'd be unfair for me to say that. I just know that I'm called upon every once in a while to do something. Can you do this or do that? And Howard's always been gracious. So, but yeah, it's changed.
Well, you did stuff with Tan Mom, right?
Yes, I did.
Tan Mom.
Bang, Tan Mom. Yeah, I did. I did a phone call with her. A lot of people heard. They like that. Tan Mom.
I don't like Tan Mom. I don't get it, but that's fine.
You're a fan of mine. That's right, Tan Moms. I call it Tan Moms.
So COVID's been rough on comedians or performers, but I know you do a kind of a stage, like a big band type thing, Billy Mira and the Hitmen, and it looks like you're doing one here in this middle of the month, right? Or is that still happening, October 16th? But
that is the question. So the laws keep changing, on the shows, and I've kind of told everybody my age, my bookers, I said, look, I know this sounds crazy. Besides interviews like this or anything, I'm not really interested in performing right now. I did a couple-ish small shows, and I did a outdoor show on July 31st. And I said, if it's not like this, I'm not interested in doing it. Because I was doing a lounge thing also that was really doing well in Westbury. And it was every week, and it was kind of like a true supper club. I loved it. I really lived for it. And we built up such a great night. It was really high-end, upscale dining and entertainment. And I just said, if it can't be like this, I don't want to do it. Just let's wait till all this blows over and I'll bring the show back. Unless they lift all of the rules up and say everybody can sit out, there's not 6 feet apart and all this other nonsense. Because, I'm not a big fan of it. I just think maybe online I do something. And that's really the next talk is we may be talking about doing a full production show online.
Are you a trained singer, or was this just something that you're like, I like to sing and I like kind of having some fun up there?
Look up and down like, here I come, to save the day. I started training at a young age. I did, and a very young age. I started.
I can't tell if you're being serious or not now. Hold on.
I don't mean either. But yeah, I started singing. That was my first thing. I wanted to be an actor or a singer when I was younger, naturally, like every other kid. And I just kind of fell more into the music end of it and did drama up until high school. And I had a teacher that would say to me all the time, you really need to get an agent. You really should go out there and do it. And I remember at the time I was always like, I'm going to, do this musical thing. And I feel like I'm a big fan of pounding my head right into the pavement. So I'm going to go the musical direction. So it actually did okay. I signed a small record deal years ago. But that career was just so hard. So over the years, I studied with Don Lawrence and other various teachers that I had. But that was my first thing. That's how I started doing everything with this vocal exercises. I guess I am trained.
No, I thought it was good. I watched, I researched for these things. I'm like, wow, we can croon a little bit.
Yeah, and then, and then to pivot from the rock thing, because I was a rock singer, into this crooning personality. But it all really kind of came to the forefront of my mind when I was in Vegas, and I would pass all the casinos, and I was invited to all these places. I said, I should take everything I've ever done and combine it into one show and make it like a real Vegas style, kind of variety show. And that's what I did with Billy Mira and the Hitmen. When I got that idea, and I started penning it when I was there, and then I got back to New York and put it into overdrive. And it's been, it's been great. We were doing great up until this whole, pandemic started. I had a lot of great things. I was going to go back to Vegas. We were talking about all these different shows and that we're booking and all that. It was crazy. I was going to do a lot of traveling this year, and it just stopped.
Sucks.
It sucks.
Sucks. I don't know what else to say.
It's like the worst. You know what's funny? You're in St. Louis.
Right.
So you're where the famous St. Louis phone call happened. David Lee Roth, St. Louis phone call.
Tell me more.
Dave Loud. Remember that? Yeah, remember the phone call where I called the Black Club in St. Toulouse.
I don't remember this one. I'll have to look this one up.
Yeah, that's the really well known one. Damn it, David Lee Roth. I don't think I called it Ray Lounge, whatever he said. It's Damn David Lee Roth. You know who I am? I never heard of you. It's Diamond David Lee Roth. I never heard of no Diamond David Lee Rocket. That's where it took place in St. Louis.
How did you decide to use our fine town to be part of a practical joke?
That is a Richard Christie find.
Well, he's a Missourian, so yeah, Kansas City.
Yeah.
He would know. Now, you and Sal actually did some work together. I was surprised to see that you let him come up and croon with you as well. Is he musically trained, or is that more for the comedy bit of this Dean Martin type?
Yeah, he's a great mind and a great entertainer personality, and Sal can sing. He can sing. He tries, and he's coming along really well. And I don't know if you ever saw, we actually do a show. We've done a couple of shows together, like a Dean and Jerry type of thing, and we have a lot of fun with it. And it's something that really could be explored in the near future, depending on what happens. But that was something that when we did a couple of shows, it went over really well, and I think that is a direction that we can go in. He's kind of like a singer like Jerry Lewis is, He can sing.
The Jerry Lewis comp is pretty good when you think about him. Sounds like you keep in touch with a lot of those guys, right? Richard and Sal.
I talk to all of those guys all the time. I talk to Sal all the time. I see all the personalities from the show. I consider, all of them a certain part of my life that I'll never forget. And who knows, a lot of our paths will cross professionally again. But I'm sure they will.
Are they happy? I'm kidding. You don't have to answer that.
A lot of people get me on these interviews and they try to prod me. So, what do you think of the new situation? I'm always like, it's great. What am I going to say?
No, I know.
I'm not one of those guys that's going to bash the show. And whatever they do, whatever thing I want to say is, whatever Howard decides to do on his show, he's allowed to do. It's Howard. You also have the ability to turn out if you don't like it.
Yeah, and I had Brian Phelan, who I don't know if you remember him, an e-camera guy.
Yeah, sure.
And I
take him to the Coliseum. He used to put my son on the Jumbotron all the time. I'm a big Islander fan.
It was funny because I just said, all right, who was an asshole there? Just give me a name. He goes, whoa, High Pitch Eric. Right away had a name. So I'm like, okay, that's a good one.
Those are characters, yeah. Those are characters. And there are people that, once you get to know them, who is a little off.
Yeah.
And Eric is definitely a little off.
Well, I enjoyed this. Again, this was fun, and I love, of course, the phone calls and the appearances, and I really do hope things get better in 2021 for all of us, including you. Is there anything you want to plug or promote or tell people where to go to find out more about?
Yeah, just keep checking back at Billy Mira and thehitmen.com. You can also get me on Facebook, Billy Mira, and Billy Mira and the Hitmen Facebook page. And send us a like, and you'll see when the shows are coming up. And hope everybody else gets through this pandemic and stays safe. And it was awesome being interviewed by Norm Macdonald, by the way. Yeah, Norm, thanks so much. It's you've never heard that before.
No, I have. I'm just going to get ready to do my joke. Prince today decided to change his name to a symbol that is unpronounceable. I will continue to call him what I've always called him, the fruit. It's funny. Everyone who comments on these says that I get that. Back when I was a little more younger and more handsome, I got Seth MacFarlane a little bit, so I get a few. But the Norm one is stuck. It really has, and I love Norm. So hopefully he'll see this and want to come on. Yeah.
By the way, Tim said hi.
Tim Sabian is a great man, and I'm going to try to get him back on here. He's got more stories to tell, I'm sure. So we scratched the surface on our first one. So we'll definitely get him on. Thank you, Billy, and thank you for watching here. Here's the pitch. Again, sponsored by Masses Restaurants. 5 locations in St. Louis. STLmasses.com is their website. Go there to see the menus and figure out where they are. If you're driving through St. Louis or if you're from St. Louis, you know about them. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.